All right, let's talk about something most of us have done, flying. But we're not going to talk about the destinations or the bad food. We're going to look at the very air you breathe inside that cabin and uncover the incredible science that keeps us all safe, miles and miles above the Earth. You know that feeling you step off a long flight and you just feel completely wiped out, maybe even a little short of breath? Well, if that's you, you're definitely not alone. And it turns out there's a really good reason for it. And it all comes down to air pressure. So let's get into it. What is actually happening inside that pressurized tube? We hear the term cabin pressure all the time, but what does that really mean for our bodies when we're up there? Well, here's the deal. Even though you might be cruising at, say, 35,000 feet, the inside of the plane is pressurized to feel like you're way, way lower. But it's not sea level. Most airlines pressurize the cabin to the equivalent of being on a mountain at about 8,000 feet. So for your body, it's like you're spending the entire flight just hanging out on a pretty tall mountain peak. And that's exactly what we call cabin altitude. It's this super carefully managed sweet spot. You know, a compromise between what the plane can handle structurally and what's comfortable for us passengers. But that lower pressure, it has a direct effect on the oxygen we can get into our bodies. And this is really the heart of the matter. The percentage of oxygen in the air is actually the same. It's still 21%, just like it is on the ground. But because the air pressure is lower, the oxygen molecules are just more spread out. So with every single breath you take, you're physically getting fewer of them. It feels to your body like you're breathing air that only has about 15 to 17% oxygen. So, how do our bodies deal with this thinner air? Well, this mild state of low oxygen, which is called hypoxia, triggers a whole cascade of responses. Our bodies are amazing, and they kick into gear almost immediately to adapt. Now, for a healthy person, the effect is noticeable, but it's pretty modest. Your blood oxygen saturation, which is normally hanging out around 98%, might dip to about 90%. That small drop, that's what can make you feel a little tired or sluggish. So, to make up for getting less oxygen with each breath, your body just automatically goes to work. You'll start breathing a little faster, your heart might beat a little quicker, and the pressure inside the arteries of your lungs actually goes up by about 20%. That higher pressure literally helps to push more oxygen from your lungs into your bloodstream. It's a pretty clever system. And this right here, this quote, gets to the absolute crucial point. Most of us, we handle this change just fine, but for people who already have an underlying heart or lung condition, that extra strain can be a really serious problem. Their bodies might just not have enough in the tank to compensate for it. And that brings us to a huge question in aviation medicine. Who exactly is at risk, and what can we do to make sure they can travel safely? So, who are we talking about here? Which specific conditions mean you should probably get a medical check before you book a flight? Well, the guidelines are actually very clear on this. We're looking at things like chronic lung diseases, like COPD, and conditions that affect the blood vessels in the lungs. A recent collapsed lung, that's a pneumothorax, is also a really big deal because any air trapped in the chest can expand at altitude, and that's just dangerous. You know, for years, the advice was super simple. The rule of thumb was basically, hey, if you can walk this far without getting too out of breath, you're probably fine to fly. But we now know that's just not a reliable test. It can totally miss people who would really struggle at cabin altitude. So modern medicine needed a much, much better way to figure this out. So what is that better way? Well, it's a really cool, specialized test that basically simulates the entire flight, all from the safety and comfort of a doctor's office. It's called the Hypoxic Altitude Simulation Test, or HAST, and honestly, the best way to think about it is as a flight simulator, but just for your lungs. It's become the gold standard for figuring out if someone is going to need some extra oxygen when they fly. The process itself sounds complex, but it's pretty straightforward. First, doctors get all your baseline readings. Then, you breathe a special mix of gas with about 15% oxygen, which perfectly mimics the air at 8,000 feet. The whole time, they're watching your vitals like a hawk. And then, at the end, they just compare the in-flight numbers to your baseline. Okay, so what are they actually looking for during this test? What's the key piece of data, the magic number that tells them if you're good to go or if you might need a little help? And here it is. It's really simple. According to the official guidelines, the critical number is 85% blood oxygen. If your level stays at or above 85% during that whole simulation, you're generally cleared to fly without any extra oxygen. But if it dips below 85%, then in-flight oxygen is recommended. It's that clean, a totally data-driven decision. Okay, so now let's talk about what happens next. How does all of this science translate into a real, practical plan to help people travel safely? So, what if the test comes back and says, yep, you're going to need in-flight oxygen? Well, that's not a travel ban, not at all. It's just a prescription for a much safer and more comfortable journey. It really all comes down to planning. You've got to contact the airline way ahead of time to get that oxygen sorted out. You'll need a formal fitness to fly letter from your doctor, and of course, a no-brainer, keep all your essential meds with you in your carry-on. And if you have your own portable oxygen machine, you have to double check that it's on that specific airline's approved list. And this is a super important detail you can't forget. Safety rules say you have to bring enough battery power for 1.5 times your total expected trip. That's to cover any crazy delays, sitting on the tarmac, getting diverted. It's a simple rule that makes sure you never, ever run out of oxygen. And finally, whether you need oxygen or not, these are just smart tips for any at-risk traveler. Staying hydrated is so important because that cabin air is incredibly dry. You'll want to avoid alcohol and sleeping pills because they can slow down your breathing. Get up and move around when you can to help your circulation. And hey, an aisle seat just makes all of that a whole lot easier. You know, when you think about it, from understanding what cabin altitude really means to these advanced simulation tests, the science of aviation medicine is what makes it possible for more and more of us to see the world. And as our world gets even more connected, it leaves you with a pretty cool question, right? What's going to be the next big thing? The next innovation that makes the skies safe and open for absolutely everyone?